stop having side conversation. I'm just kidding. So welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Mills. Until recently, I was the Southern Political Director for the DNC. Prior to that, served as Virginia's Executive Director of their state party for 3 years. Prior to that, a series of statewide campaigns as Finance Director and a stint as Finance Director for my state party from dating all the way back to 2006 through 2008. So I've got a combination of campaign and state party fundraising experience and have been working with primarily the state parties in the South, both through my time as an executive director and through my time with DNC. So I'm pretty familiar. I tell you all that to say I'm familiar with some of the challenges that you all are facing in your states, but I really want to ask you at the beginning of this training to please use this time. This is the last thing we have to do today. This presentation shouldn't take but about 45 minutes. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for question and discussion, and we're going to stop for some discussion points along the way, but I want to make sure that you're asking and presenting to the group or providing to the group some opportunities to get a little bit more specific about the challenges you're facing in your states. I guarantee you, if you're dealing with something you feel like is unique to your state, there's probably a very similar challenge in another state, and someone else is going to benefit from you bringing it to the group today. So with that, welcome. The goal of my training today is to provide you with a strategic set of concepts, skills, and structure that will hopefully help you stabilize and grow your core operating budget over time, which is why I presume you're all here. You raise a certain amount of money every year, it comes in fits and starts, you're a little frustrated about the fact that you'd like to raise more, and you want to learn or develop some skills that will hopefully, when you bring them back to your organization, will hopefully help you. Also, hopefully we're having a little fun. To achieve that goal, we're going to utilize some concepts, which I'm going to review with you, which I just want you to kind of embed in your thinking about your organization as we're going through the training, when you're thinking about your fundraising program, think about these concepts. We're going to apply them to a plan and organizing a plan, and organizing our work, and then we're going to focus our time on active forms of fundraising today. So we purposefully left out, though we certainly can talk about it in our discussion period, we purposefully left out of this training mail and email and other what I would call passive forms of fundraising. We're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive today on the stuff between people, sitting across a table, picking up the phone, actually cultivating and recruiting and keeping donors who typically will be giving at a slightly higher level, big investors to your organization. That's not to say that we won't talk about mail, or please bring it up, but I wanted to focus today. So quick overview. We're going to talk about our concepts. We're going to touch on planning and budget, talk about that active fundraising I just mentioned. We're going to talk about, sort of in closing, how to analyze, share, and adapt over time, and then jump right into questions. So without any further ado, our 3 key strategic concepts for the day. The first, the importance of defining your role. And I know this is beguiles state parties across the country, which is, how many times have you been on the phone with a donor? Have you been out to lunch with a friend? Have you been sitting across the table from a candidate or an elected official? And inevitably the question comes, look, what does the state party do? What do you guys do? What do you do? I know what so-and-so is doing. He's running for Congress, so I gave him $2,600. I know, I get that, right? We met, I like him, he believes in what I believe in, I want him to win, I give him $2,600. What do you guys do? So that's what I mean by defining your role. An answer, operational, and a pitch answer to that question. Developing those things is actually easier than you'd think, and often just takes, it doesn't have to take weeks and months to come up with this, super elaborate strategic plan. The strategic plans are great. I'm talking about just, getting down to work, defining your role in a way that you can keep in your brain and use to raise money. Measure everything is concept number 2. There's nothing more persuasive, particularly to a lot of the business class and the investor class that you'll interact with, than actual metrics of progress. Think about the nonprofit boards you've sat on. Think about the way universities and other organizations raise money. They show independent progress over time. Look at all the things we're doing that we're accomplishing without your help, imagine what we'd be able to do together, right? So you're showing both simultaneously showing the health of your organization, but you're also making a persuasive argument that more could be accomplished with their donation. It's also a politically powerful tool. Even this was my experience in Virginia, but I don't know if it necessarily translates everywhere, but often my biggest critics were the people sitting across the table from me in my executive committee meeting. People who sort of incredulously would look at you and go, like, we're paying this kid to run the state party, but what's really happening? Is the party getting better? Is the party getting worse? Is it what? Most people, even people intimately familiar with your organization, like executive committee members or central committee members, you'll find when you really start going through this process with them, they actually lack an operational understanding of what the state party really is by the numbers. For instance, I won't bet you, I could pick up the phone and call an executive committee member in almost any state. I don't want to call anybody out, but to ask how many volunteers in my campaign does your state party currently have? I'm willing to bet you they couldn't answer that question, right? But here's the good news about that number, just for the sake of argument. The good news about that number is it's going to grow. And if you create a benchmark for your organization, on this day the number was this, 2,260, right? Into the future, that number is going to be more than 2,260. And so simply by picking 2 points in time, there's going to be plenty of organic growth, but there's also a million and one wonderful things you can do to invest in growing your volunteer list over time, a great activity. But you'll have the ability to show, you give a presentation that sort of a state of the state party to your executive committee, in one quarter, at the end of the next quarter, growth. We are growing. The answer in a metric is we are improving, and that's so important to long-term fundraising and donor cultivation. And then finally, a concept that I couldn't really think of a name for, but is very important, so I've just, for lack of a better term, this is like a Dave Mills coined for this training term, but donor evolution. And there's two aspects to donor evolution, which we'll get to in a minute. But in short, it's essentially the idea that someone is more than the check they give you. They're capable of providing more to the party than that one check one time. And a great measure of your program is what are you doing to get beyond that one check one time? What's the life cycle of that donor? And two, particularly for lower dollar contributors, how are you charting someone or engaging someone to incentivize repeated gifts over time, as opposed to just that one mail piece or whatever? So donor evolution. Those are going to be our three concepts today. So first, defining your role. What does the state party do? Killer question. So this is my opinion, and please chime in, but contrary to what everyone likes to say, state parties by themselves don't win elections. They also don't lose elections. Rather, it's the partnership between a well-run campaign and a strong state party that presents the best opportunity to win an election at any level. And I think, I'm hoping, for this room, that is a relatively uncontroversial statement. Unfortunately, and I'm sure each of you have suffered this, unfortunately, the state party is often held, which goes back to our measure everything and develop new metrics for your organization. The state party is often held to only one thing, right? Victory and defeat. You lose a governor's race, everyone should be fired. The state party is a disaster, oh my gosh, it's terrible. You win a governor's race, everyone's a genius, the state party's never been better, look how strong we are. Very often you get more of the blame than the credit too. But at its most basic, a state party organization, to begin to answer this question, is simply a collection of resources and services that should be built with a campaign partnership in mind. And it's on your stewardship, which is really your jobs as staff and chairs of state parties and officers of parties. Your job is to essentially be a temporary good steward of these resources and quality services. That's really what any donor or anyone thinking about investing in your organization should be judging you on. So measuring everything, we talked a little bit about this, I kind of jumped to this, but it's helpful, there's not a better time than right now on sort of the early eve of a presidential cycle to be starting this planning process. Because, as I mentioned, between 2015, January 1, 2015, December 31, 2016, 24 months, there's going to be a lot of organic growth in your state party organizations. If you just stayed home and did nothing, there's going to be some improved uptick in engagement with the party, right? Because people are going to be getting excited to vote for president. At least Democrats would, on some level, be more excited than they are right now. And so deciding when you want to kind of plant your flag and say, this is us on this day, and our sort of judgment day needs to be, either 2016, or we're going to have in the case of North Carolina, there'll be a gubernatorial nominee in April, May, June of 2016, and you'll want the partnership with that campaign to be strong. So we're going to shoot a target date of April 1, 2016, and we want to be able to show a set of valuable assets we can give to our gubernatorial candidate. To the extent that some of those assets, like a volunteer list, going back to my example, to the extent that some of those assets are not desirable right now or aren't where they need to be, that informs the work of your state party moving forward. If Senator Hagan is having a hell of a time getting people to volunteer in Charlotte, or for a better example, Greensboro, right? You'll know that odds are, even with the presidential campaign in town, that the Attorney General, whoever has the nomination in North Carolina, is going to have a similar problem. They're going to have trouble recruiting volunteers. So you have 36 months, 20 plus months, to develop a strategy for growing volunteers in your volunteer list and recruiting people onto your volunteer roles so that you can hand that list over to your campaign to your statewide campaign down the road. And in that way, each of you can find very specific, constructive, creative, in many respects, answers to the question, what does a state party do? The answer in that example is, our state party is focused on providing the most free labor for a statewide candidate in North Carolina history. And right now, we're not ready to do that. But here is our strategy for recruiting in these key areas where we've historically struggled, and that's why we need a $10,000 investment from you. It's going to go to these 4 events designed to recruit new volunteers with national surrogates. We're going to do this, this, and this, but we can't do it without your 10K, right? Like, value. Here is how many people we have now. This is what we're going to have in the future if you contribute to this growth. So quickly, while we're on the subject, this is kind of our first brainstorming moment. What are some of the things, the unique resources and services your state party provides to campaigns right now? You guys give me an idea? Anybody want to? Yes, ma'am.
The voter file.
Perfect. You are the warehouse for probably the most used, undervalued, incredibly important resource that there is. Other than your staff talent that you provide at the party, is probably the most important resource every campaign across your state uses. So you provide a voter file, second to none. What else?
Subject matter experts.
Subject matter experts. Give me an example.
Finance.
That's right, yeah, your staff, your department heads, your staff talent, absolutely.
We do training, and we also just recently had forums for our gubernatorial candidates.
Like issue forums or get to know you forums?
Both combinations, just asking them
That's
questions
fantastic.
that make decisions on who they should vote for. We had 5 candidates in this race.
That's incredible. So you could say trainings as a bucket, and then sort of issues and meet and greets and other events as another bucket. You have one as well.
We provide the negative voice for our candidates. We keep a full-time
Sure.
workshop and minutes and tracking and rapid response on social media.
And this was, just stay on that for a second, this was something we discovered we weren't doing a good job of quantifying, right? Because so often that voice of opposition, that attack dog voice, is something that people judge based on a gut feeling. Like, I don't think you guys are doing enough. Right? They can't quantify it, and then you want to respond and be like, actually, we're doing more than ever before, but you like have trouble kind of pinpointing. And we had to sit down and actually develop a system
getting my comp shop to do weekly quantitative reports has probably been my biggest struggle, but every week they report how many headlines and how many regional converts, how many new Twitter followers, how many Facebook followers, how many retweets, like that kind of stuff that we can quantify for our candidates that has value.
And the great thing, getting back to our training, is like that is so sellable, right? No one else is doing that with you.
Right.
People are, hesitant to say some of the things that only a state party can say. So you get the idea. Like part of your note paper and part of this process is be thinking about these things, because identifying them and quantifying them is part of the secret to making your pitch, particularly for larger investments. So let's jump right into part one, establishing your program. Quickly through these, so more than likely you guys have like a combination of sort of these long-term goals, but I'm guessing a few of you in the room also have some pretty immediate needs that make a basic plan fairly straightforward. As we touched on, the processes have to take a long time, and we're going to talk about how important it is to ground your sort of finance plan and budget in reality, but remember that this is about an operational answer. It's less a political document. Here are some goals people shared with me prior to the training. Curious to know if there are any others that jump out, but to reliably make payroll and monthly operating expenses without the issue of a big fire drill or freaking out. Create a new fundraising event in an underutilized area, hire a new staff member, fund a program or improve a resource, as we talked about, or simply to pay down debt. And there are, people always talk about debt in state parties like it's like some kind of shameful thing, which is funny because it's like, first of all, the DNC had this done to it. Like the president, had a great campaign, and they have asked the DNC to take charge of paying down some of his campaign debt, and this happens in our states. I had to write a $13,000 check in Virginia to pay off a statewide candidate's debt after they lost in 2009, and it was it sort of hurt to do it, but at the same time, who was left but us? Like the coordinated ended up being our expenses. So no shame in debt earned through the process of campaigning, in my view. So elements of the plan, so we'll touch on these quickly. It's a little cheesy, but if you're working with organizations, you're pretty familiar with this acronym probably, but this is a great quick way to, and we'll get into some specifics, but a great quick way to kind of just gauge, is what we're talking about trying to do gonna work? And the first is specific, speaks for itself, measurable, which we've touched on a lot, achievable. There's nothing worse. How many chairs do we have in the room? There's principals and other people who have to be on the phone raising money. There's nothing more discouraging, right, than going into a call time block, 2 hours of call time, and your executive director walks into the room and like pastes to the door, you need $10,000, right? It's call time session. And a couple things jump out. I've never raised $10,000 in 2 hours. That's like physically impossible. 2, is there even $10,000 in this book? 3, if you don't get there, you start to wonder, like, gosh, maybe I should have walked in that parade. Maybe I should have taken that meeting with that legislator. Maybe there's something else I should be doing with my time because I'm clearly not good at this. Make sure it's awful for morale, and it can really be discouraging. So make sure the goals you set are grounded in reality and achievable. Resourced. And here's another kind of interesting thing. Quick question. What are the 2 ways you can actually tell what's important to a person or to an organization? How they spend their money and time. Right. And so often I'll meet with a state party or be talking to an ED, and they'll get halfway through their kind of, their frustrated kind of discussion. Like, gosh, I just wish, like, we just gotta find this money. It's gotta be out there. Like, I know it's out there. I say, dude, do you have a finance director? Is your chair making fundraising phone calls for you? Like, have you invested the money in staff capacity to achieve what you're talking about? And has your volunteer leader of your organization invested their time in making this happen? Like, if those 2 things aren't happening, that's what I mean by resourced. If you don't have just those basic investments of resources, chances are most of your plan is going to fall a little bit short. So you want to be asking yourself, are we providing the sufficient amount of resources necessary to get this done? And then team supported. This is the other thing that So I sort of adapted this a little bit, but how often do you walk into like an organization and there's like 2 people really freaking out and everyone else is like kind of happy, you know? Like the chair of the ED are like sweating bullets, or the operations director and the ED are freaking out, and the political director and comms director and data director are like, doo-doo-doo, yeah. Everything's fine. It's like chances are you haven't done it. It's hard to do this because sometimes you don't want to shock people if the situation is necessarily too dire. But I think it's really important to explain across your team, staff, and volunteer leadership what it is you're trying to achieve financially. Partly because everything, you're surprised at the help people will give you. You can always find a diamond in the rough that way. But also, I think it helps beat back some of the goofier ideas that can either distract or pull resources or pull money away from the program you're trying to put together, right? If your vice chair for awesomeness decides that like what we really need is this huge banquet honoring so-and-so, you can kind of be like, well, actually, we don't have like the money for that, and I don't see that anywhere in our plan. Is it possible for us to incorporate the award into our JJ dinner or into another standing event? But it kind of like, it also, educating people about what you're trying to achieve, diffuses the help and sort of the knowledge, but it also keeps people from kind of wasting your time with goofiness. So let's take a look at 2 quick actual quotes from 2 past executive directors and see if you can spot red flags or positive kind of notes in the way they talk about a problem that they're having, okay? So here's Executive Director A, planning example. The event we were planning for just fell through because we couldn't get a speaker. We're going to try again next month sometime, maybe in a different city since the Senate candidate is doing something in town in a few days. In the meantime, I'm worried about our budget. We just made 3 field hires and I have no idea if we can keep them. Basically, I need 20 grand in the next 6 days to get me through. I can put the chair on the phone, but I don't know if there are a lot of people left to call since we just had our JJ dinner in June. Can you help? Right? Like, that's a real problem. Example number 2. Hey man, I have an event coming up on July 27th in Smithville, and I could use a speaker. We've never done an event in this part of the state before, but we've been making a lot of calls into the area, and I'm pretty confident we can raise 15 to 20K with a little extra boost. We're bringing in a new digital director in August to really expand our program, and if this event makes its goal, we'll have some additional money in the budget for his department, which would really help the Senate race. If we can't get anyone to come, we'll just use the chair, but wanted to see if you could help. So of these 2, just generally, which one do you get the vibe from has their SHIT together? Right. Specificity, independence, a plan. We are bringing on a new digital director in August. That money's already been raised. I'm looking for extra money to get their program off the ground, to do more. If you can't provide this great speaker, we're going to go with the people we have. But make no mistake, this event is happening on July 27th in Smithville. It's in our budget, it's in our plan, but we're just looking for a little bit of extra help. Now, it's certainly not perfect. No sort of like, no state party situation really is. You guys are dealing with a lot of challenges. And for instance, like a legitimate excuse, like this poor executive director is dealing with a Senate candidate who's probably scooping up money hand over fist all over the state, right? So it's like it's not like this is a bad, like bad staff work. This is potentially decent staff work dealing with the lack of a quality plan, right? They're trying to make it work, but they just don't have a clear idea about how to do it. So make sure you're sounding and working and thinking a lot more like Executive Director B than A. We talked about these. We'll mention that at the end. So active fundraising, this is kind of my favorite part. So I put that Calvin House picture in there for John Vizziano, who always makes fun of me for my for my pictures and my presentations. So do like Calvin, get on the phone, call people. Call time couldn't be more critical to your fundraising program. And I know that it can be difficult. Believe me, I know that. I've had phones thrown at me. I've thrown a few phones. I get it. Chairs in the room, as counterintuitive on certain days as it may be, it is your most important job. And I say that knowing that the vast majority of state parties in the country have volunteer chairs working full-time professional jobs outside of their organization. There are very few paid chairs in our party. So we're going to talk at the end of this about how to adapt some of these ideals to the real world, right? How do I be a lawyer and a chair? How do I be a business person and a chair? How do I make it work? Same thing with EDs, I get it. But somebody's got to do it, it's got to get done. There's no hard and fast rule, but from any individual who wants to jump in and actively fundraise, 4 hours per day is a great guideline, 20 hours per week is a great guideline, and for you guys, many of you fighting to find new donors and expand, that number could double. How important is it? In 2012, the Democratic Party of Virginia raised more money into its operating budget, independent of the coordinated campaign for Tim Kaine, independent of the presidential race, $1.6 million in just operational money from basically these sources. Our JJ went pretty well, email, events, national convention gave us a little bump, mail program is great, but $695,000 came from calls and meetings, 43% of our revenue. That's a presidential target state party in a presidential year. That percentage is, those raw numbers and that percentage is going to fluctuate for everybody. But it gives you a sense of, even at a point where Democrats up and down the income spectrum, Democrats up and down the giving spectrum, were getting engaged in state party, like a top tier election, a U.S. Senate race and the presidential race. We saw upticks in everything, but nothing compared to this. A big part of this for me was that in July of 2012, my chair quit his job and went full-time for 6 months. And we raised over 50% of that, $695,000, between July and October of 2012. He then was unemployed for another 4 months, 5 months, longer than that, almost a year and a half. So I don't recommend it necessarily, but I don't know if he would. He's now Secretary of Public Safety in Virginia, but so he landed on his feet. But but my point being, it's such a powerful engine of revenue. There's like no comparison to all these other big ticket items. What are the elements of a good call? How do you judge a great interaction with a donor versus a mediocre interaction? Some key elements. You've listened to and understood the interests of the donor. You've credentialed staff, which is something that particularly as chairs I don't always hear chairs do, and I don't always hear candidates do, which is a missed opportunity. You've articulated the role of the party.
What does that mean?
Oh,
so this is what I mean. So you're on the phone with, with Jack. You're on the phone with Jack Ryan, and you're trying to give you a gift, right? You're talking to Deanna Jones, whatever donor X, and you ask them for a contribution. They balk a little bit. You're like, okay, well, you can't do $2,500. Would you sponsor the JJ at $1,000? Would you consider doing this the X, Y, or Z? At that moment, if they're saying yes or if they're interested, it's your opportunity as the leader of the organization, somebody with very limited time, to empower a staff member by name with that individual. Jenny is gonna call you. When Jenny calls you, she has my full confidence. She organizes events all the time. She's our finance director. She's our executive director, whatever. Jenny's gonna call you. Please work with Jenny to accomplish the goal that you've pledged to me. Basically, when Jenny calls you, it's like I'm calling you, moving forward. Because when I hang up this phone, I don't know that I'm gonna have 3 more opportunities to call you to follow up. That's Jenny's job. And the more that you can credential your staff, one, it saves you time. Two, it elevates the level of the staffers that are going to be responsible for raising some of this money. So that gives Jenny the opportunity, this is only possible if you're happy, with the people working for you. But you have to, here's me chuckling, it's terrifying. But like, you want Jenny to reach a point in her career where she's able to pick up the phone and make a solicit of that donor herself. You want her to graduate to that level. She's on the phone getting that second $1,000 at the end of the year from that person or following up. So that's what I mean by credentialing staff. You gotta back them up. Use your leadership wattage to elevate them as well. You've thanked the donor when appropriate. You've made an ambitious and specific ask. You do all of that in a reasonable amount of time. Nice thing about being at a state party, and there are a few, so savor this one, is that you don't have sort of the wham-bam philosophy of a campaign. If you need to take 20 or 25 minutes with a donor on the phone, I'm all for it. I think that if you end with a stronger relationship because you heard somebody out or you gave somebody the time of day, do it. There are unless a candidate starts 24 months out, they really, they've got somebody in that room with them, chasing them off the phone to move on to the next thing. So you've got an advantage on them in that respect. Yes?
So I always feel like I have an opposite issue in that people can't wait to get off the phone. Right? They want to hear the question, they want to give you their answer. So how do I bridge? I mean, everybody, the first one listened and understood the interest of my donor. I can't get them to talk to me. They're just like, no, I don't want to give goodbye.
Yeah.
I'm lucky they didn't hang up. That they actually took time to say goodbye to me.
So in that population of people, are there things that you could ask from them, their opinion, their attendance at something that's free, that might be interesting? I reckon, if this is the vast majority of your donors, it might be, it might have to take a different tact. But if there's a book of people or a file of people, category of donor that just are ignoring you, it may be that you need somebody other than you to be calling them. There's a possibility that if you've got some expendable income, you think you're important enough to not get a staff call, but that you're looking for an elected official to call you, or you're looking for some other kind of fancy person to call. So it may be that they have to get kicked over to a process that includes another voice. It could be that they remember a state party that wasn't as awesome as the one you're running now, and that you want to invite them to a state party event for free, for them to get a flavor of this new organization, how it's run, how many people are at the event. One of the things that helps too is if they see other people they think are at their level at an event, if you can just get them in the room, it's also helpful because it's validating. Oh, there's Roger. Roger's a partner at my opposing law firm. We're basically the same person. Roger's here. I'm in the right place.
So essentially look for excuses to build that relationship before you make the ask.
Correct.
Whether it's over the phone or...
And this kind of cuts to a point we'll make, which is thinking more about you to the extent you can, again, because you have payroll to make too, but more like a nonprofit and less like a campaign.
Relational versus transactional.
Right. The longer you can go without asking them for something, the more you can ask for when you can. Call results are documented and your follow-up occurs quickly. Remember that a donor is more than a check, and we'll expound on that. You want to be positive. I know it sounds obvious, but it's very important. Less, partly in tone, hey, everything's great, but also it's helpful prior to jumping on the phone for an extended period of time, calling and talking to people. Ask your staff members, ask your executive director, or ask your chair if you're an ED getting ready to make calls. Give me something good that happened today. Was there a great article? Did you just have an event that last year brought 30 people out? Did it bring 70 people out this year? Is there some indicator things are going well, right? You have something that you can offer up on the call about why you're so confident.
Can I go back to something?
Yes, sir. Please.
The ambitious and specific ask.
Yes.
That's one of the issues I have is knowing, how much to ask for, how much the person can give. And I know they've done some research on prior gives, but banks, like, that's always the biggest issue, how much should we really ask for?
So I'm going to say something right now that's different. If you ask a different person who does this, they might give you a different answer. So keep that in mind. This is my opinion. My opinion is you ask for what, based on your research, what the most appropriate number you can get to is. If somebody's giving, $2,600 every 2 years to the 3rd congressional district candidate, doesn't matter if they're a little kooky or if they're the best candidate in the world, but they're a reliable federal giver. If somebody happens to give, they double max to whoever the presidential candidate is every 4 years, whatever it might be. This is somebody who has, at a minimum, every 2 to 4 years, $4,000 to $5,000 of expendable income. You kind of get a sense of like, okay, so a $2,500 table sponsorship is probably right within their wheelhouse. A $5,000 table sponsorship event probably a little aggressive if they've never given to the party before ever. But depending on how your call is going or how your lunch is going, you may want to shoot for the moon and ask. A $1,000 gift is probably that's something they would put on a credit card. It's what they'd spend on a suit, right? They wouldn't think twice about it. They put $1,000 on a credit card and be fine. That is would be almost like sort of a target minimum. But the thing about I'm a big fan of getting people on the board, right? So at the end of the day or at the end of that call, if you feel like $250 was a victory, but they're now a giver to you, they had to enter their email address and all sorts of information about themselves. They came to the event that they bought a ticket for at $250, whatever it is. I'm just a big fan of that. And I think campaigns, because they're on such a compressed timetable, are looking for the right ask that moment, that month, because they have a television ad to pay for, they have something else going on. So they might do $2,500, $1,000, and then be like, okay, well, we'll call back, at another time. And maybe they'll schmooze some more, trying to get them next month. And getting $250 and having the donor think that they're done is actually maybe counterproductive to the campaign, right? But to a party who's just looking to get people giving and on the board, people that you can then go back to and give nice things to and give a bunch of time to and attention to, I think sometimes you just have to use your judgment, but sometimes it can be more effective just to simply get people, get them up there with a number. And almost any significant number makes people feel invested, and there's a lot of benefit that can come to that for you. So I need somebody to do a little quick role play with me. I need somebody, a lady preferably, to play Susan, a donor, on a call with then Lieutenant Governor Tim Kaine. This is an actual transcript of a call with the then Lieutenant Governor of Virginia during his run for governor in 2005. I want to give you a sense of a call time interaction, and we're gonna kind of dissect it really quickly. Patsy?
I've been on the phone so many times.
You actually kind of sound like Susan. So can you read this?
No.
That you saw? Can you come up and yeah, come on up and read it. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. So Governor came to the phone and says, "Hello, Susan. It's Tim Kaine calling."
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Well, I'm actually having a great day. I was endorsed by the AFL-CIO at their annual convention today. I got a chance to speak, which was a thrill. Also, we crossed a milestone in our door-knocking effort. One of our campaign volunteers just knocked on our 500,000th door, which is huge.
Woo, that sounds great, Tim. Congratulations.
Thanks. How are things going with you? How's Bob?
Oh, things are great. Bob's working hard. He just made partner, which is good and bad because we won't get as much free time anymore. I do think next month we're going to take a trip to the Chesapeake Bay, though.
That sounds great. I know that the environment, particularly the bay and the watershed, are extremely important here.
Well, it's part of our family history. Bob grew up there, and we were married not far from there. It's real important to us that we preserve it in the way we remember it, as much as we can anyway.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. My family loves the outdoors, too. As you know, Governor Warner and I worked very hard, particularly in the 2004 budget battle, to ensure funding for the Chesapeake Bay preservation efforts.
That's why my husband keeps writing you checks, I think.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, but it's true that you and Bob have been great supporters of mine, and I'm calling because I need your help again. My campaign is approaching a critical moment because we're about to start running the television ads that will define me on everything from taxes to transportation, and I need your help. Your support got us to this point. I'm going to just be bold and ask you and Bob to invest another $5,000 in this campaign.
Oh, Tim, I just don't know if we can do that right now. One more campaign contribution, there might not be any vacation for a long time. We've been getting calls from everyone, DSC, CCC, even everybody from the DNC. I'm really sorry. Maybe in the fall we could give again.
It's okay, Susan, I understand. Can I just ask you one other thing?
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that people understand how different my administration would be from my opponents in terms of protecting the environment, particularly the Bay. And I was hoping you and Bob might be able to host an event in your home where I can come down and talk with some friends and other folks who you work with on Bay issues and see about asking them to be supportive of the campaign.
Tim, we would love to. I was just telling Bob that there's one couple in particular we could introduce you to who are fabulous and ought to contribute to you. Also, I think there's some people at Bob's firm that have been talking about meeting you too.
Oh, Susan, that's great. Thanks. I'm going to have a young woman named Joanna contact you. She works on my campaign, and she'll have some dates that you guys can choose from for the event. Be sure to work closely with Joanna. She is really great and will be able to handle just about anything you need from her.
Okay, sounds good, Tim. I look forward to hearing from Joanna, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks again, Susan. Say hello to Bob for me.
Will do. Bye-bye.
Okay. First of all, round of applause. Super convincing Susan. So, what's the governor do well here?
Keeps her talking, keeps her involved.
Does he do well? He asks, makes an ask. What does Susan say? No. Can't do it. Does he give up?
No, alternatives.
Pivots to an event hosting ask.
Right.
Very good move. It would have been nice for him to try for a $2,500, kind of like put it on the list. My guess is that he, from knowing her, knew that that wasn't going to work either, so he just kind of jumped right into the event ask. What else does he do well?
Keeps talking about the issues she's concerned about.
Right. Stays on the issue she cares about. She sort of volunteers it a little bit at the beginning. But clearly, that call sheet details a long history of giving to Bay Preservation or to some other foundation, which has given the governor the opportunity to determine that's a note he should play on the call. Spouse name. How's Bob doing? There are a lot of call sheets I see that have a field for things like family names and other things. They're totally empty. Other key piece of information that Susan volunteers to the governor on this call, which could be a fundraising lead.
She's got a friend.
She has a friend, one couple in particular, right, who she mentions. Bob just made partner in his firm. Not necessarily, those of you familiar with the legal profession, not necessarily meaning that Bob has a ton more income. He's probably had to buy in. But it does mean that he's graduating to a new income level over time. It's a positive professional development for Bob. It's worth noting on the call sheet. Chances are, if you're a chair or you're on the, you have to kind of train yourself, which is part of why we're here, to listen for these things because your staff member is not going to be on the phone. They don't know what you just learned. So those notes on the sheet, just made partner, has a couple, will host event. Those are the takeaways from that call. When that call hits Joanna's hands, it's now her staff responsibility to, one, record that information in the donor record and then to follow up as necessary. And each portion of that process involves some trust and some discipline and some hard work. It also requires you to have made the call in the first place. But it gives, I hope it gives you a sense, I know it's a candidate versus chair of the party, but I hope it gives you a sense of an interaction that that you're seeking to have and what it looks like. So they make me laugh, so I put them in. Donor cultivation, the art of making people feel good. So unless you're in crisis mode, cultivation should be a major part of your call time, okay? There's nothing worse than the feeling of not having anyone left to call. Remember Executive Director A? They just had their JJ. They basically called everyone who gives them money for that event. She's nervous, or he's nervous about calling again. It's a sign that more than likely cultivation over time was not happening. Every campaign reaches a point which you can dub a million different things, but hitting the wall, right? Where you've just taken everything you can take. Typically happens in like September or October, where you just have run roughshod over your donor base. You sent out 7,000 emails, blah, blah, blah. This cuts to the difference between state parties and campaigns. You have the power to cultivate longer and potentially better than a lot of campaigns do. And it should be part of every call time day, every call time hour, even if it's 4 or 5 people. One chair has this great practice, which he calls his homework, which is, still a working professional. He asks his staff to generate 10 names who are donor targets but have never contributed to the party before, and their business numbers. And he goes home at the end of the day, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and he'll call and leave messages on those business lines. So that the next morning, he might get a call back from one of them, or 2 of them, right? But he's planting seeds at the end of the day for what is hopefully somebody giving him a call back. And the messages he leaves are pretty generic, but they're very uplifting. It's like, hey, it's Chairman Smith, just calling to let you know we just had this great event, things are going really well. Did you see that great poll? Did you see that great article? Just call and check in and see how you're feeling. Just got in off the road, blah, blah, blah. Give me a call back when you can. Constantly doing that, reaching out to new people and expanding, and seeking face-to-face contact when possible. A great step in a cultivating like a donor relationship is to go from the phone call to the meeting. Very often you're on the phone with somebody, it's, again, enormously time-consuming, I know, but my old chair in Virginia, Brian Moran, used to drive me crazy with this. It was his favorite thing to pivot to if he thought somebody wasn't going to write him a check. He'd be like, well, let's get coffee. Can you just ask for the money? But he would eventually get the money, but it would just take a little longer. But again, you have that ability, which candidates don't often do with such a demanding schedule, to open up time in your day to do those quick, small group meetings and discussions. You've engaged, you've listened, recorded the information and followed up. And there are a bunch of different strategies which we can touch on for cultivating new donors. One of my favorites is this phrase. State party chairs and EDs don't have a lot of superpowers, right? But you are entering into a phase where potentially with the presidential race coming in, we've got midterms now and then 15 building into 16, some opportunities may present themselves. A couple of White House tickets here, a couple of a visiting, the president, the first lady does a speech in the state. You've got a house party with 40 people that you have planned, and this person's just constantly been a stick in the mud. It's like really hard to motivate them. Comping people to things that seem neat or complimentary invitations in general are a very powerful tool, which I want you to kind of like, are you using this tool in your state party effectively? First of all, most people, like socialized normal human beings, have a hard time turning down a complimentary invitation. It's like pretty rude, right? 40 people are paying, and you and your spouse are free. I'm asking you to come as my guest. It will bother me if you aren't there. I will feel it's gonna be a little weird if you don't come. This is totally free. I'm mailing you a ticket with the big word "come" written on it. Come and spend some time with me. Believe me, before I became chair, I thought the state party sucked too, but it's awesome. And I want you to hear and see from these people how great this organization, the energy we're building is. Come as my guest. JJ is probably the best for this. It is the glitziest your party will ever get. Everyone's dressed up. There's a great real estate bragging rights thing going on. Tables closer to the stage, far away from the stage. Can you get people seated next to an elected official, a friend, you know, what can you do to get that little group of, you know, that $10,000 from that one person who just like, damn it, you just can't get it. Can you give that little extra attention to somebody? And it's one of the few ways that, again, like a campaign would not necessarily, unless it was very early, make this decision. If somebody's not going to give, they're happy with 20 people in a house if every single one of them paid, right? But you've got this, you got to be thinking, you know, 2 years, 3 years down the road, maybe this is the event that finally gets so-and-so to open up and to be more engaged and to take my calls and to be around. Come as my guest, very helpful too. And finally, the question for the cultivation section of this is that this sort of a hanging question, which is, how are you saying thank you at your state parties? I can tell you I've made the mistake in the past of partly it was based on staff capacity. I just didn't feel like, it's like I don't want to be bothered with it, where we were only doing them once a quarter. And I'm convinced, like we were doing them, you know, January 1 to March 30, 31, and then April 1, 2, 3, we'd be stuffing this like mountainous volume of thank you notes for everybody who gave anything.
That's for all your one-times and event people.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's a mess. And you know, it's not often enough, it's not immediate enough. People, I think, in this day and age too, expect, you know, things to be faster. It also, you know, your fancy people, or the people you're really trying to take care of, get lost in the shuffle. There isn't a personal touch. So we can, again, talk a little bit about that at the end as well. I love this picture. It like sums up Nixon for me in my mind. Like, yeah, you know it. So be the opposite of this is the final note I'll leave you with on cultivating. Treat people like they matter.
The equivalent today is people on their cell phone the whole time.
Yes, walking right by you. Yeah.
You know, I have problems with people trying to do the fundraising call or the fundraising meeting, and they still aren't checking their messages.
I would take my boss's BlackBerry from him when he would go into lunches, because he had one of those hip plastic things, and it just became like a Western, just constantly drawing it up to look at it. He was like, what could possibly be happening? But yes, Patsy.
Can we go back to the thank you for just a second? They should be immediate and they should be personal, but can they be by email? Or do they have to be handwritten notes?
No, sure. I mean, I think you have to know. I think if somebody gave through the mail,
That's okay. Thank you in the mail?
yeah, it's a judgment. It's a judgment call. It's a resource call. It also begs the question: are you even asking for email on your remit envelopes if you're sending out fundraising? For a lot of state parties, that's not the case, which is sort of like a separate issue. But if you're collecting that data from people who give to you through kind of more old-fashioned methods like mail or at events, then by all means, if you feel like it's an appropriate way to say thank you, yes. I do think, though, that I think it just presents a letter or a note or a handwritten note, depending on, you know, how you draw those lines, affords the opportunity for a personalization that just isn't possible any other way. You know, being able to scratch out Robert and write Bob, you know, make a little note. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks so much. You know, whatever it is, I just think, you know, email can be tricky if you're, you know, particularly like a form email that gets lost in people's spam folders and stuff like that. So it's tough. But I mean, if you feel like, you know, look, if people RSVP for an event exclusively over email, and everyone who gave is in that, you know, is coded that way, you know, generating a big thank you with a photo from the event or whatever is pretty cool. I mean, the chances are everyone would appreciate that. And there's an environmental argument to be made for transitioning people over to more kind of email-based communication. It's also cheaper. So there's a million ways. I think it's just you have to ask yourself, who are we talking to? And is, like, you know, Betty Ann going to be, you know, upset that she didn't get, you know, she didn't get an actual letter. So it's like understanding who you're dealing with. So this concept is near and dear to my heart because it saved me on a lot of on a lot of like tough fundraising assignments, and it's one I wanted to bring to you guys today. Again, for lack of a better term, I can't claim credit for the term, but it's like not used a lot anymore. It's called, it's a Rolodex, those don't exist, but like Rolodexing. Put simply, this is the process through which a current supporter's personal contacts and network are mined for new potential fundraising sources. It should be, takes time, but it should be an essential practice of your fundraising team. And if it's not, I highly recommend adding this practice. It can expand your call universe even in off years because of the personal connection, which we'll explain. And we get back to that phenomenon of credentialing staff. Chairs can't do this. This is a staff project. Basically, the way the process works is this. You have, I guarantee you, like if I asked one of you to name him or her, you would be able to name a person who is like a fundraising rock for you. A $5,000 check, a $2,500 check, like every year automatic for ages. You start with people like that. For Virginia would be Chris Little, former president of Newsweek, huge Democratic Party supporter, and has this massive professional network, right? He was in publishing and journalism sits on the journalism board at Columbia University, board of William & Mary's, incredible guy. Knows a ton of wealthy and successful professionals and people. And so you go to the people who are not going to say no to you first, and you say simply this, some version of this. Chris, here is our problem. Here's what we're trying to raise money for. Here's our challenge. With our current universe of people that we can pick up the phone and call, we can't get there. This new staffer I want to hire is a $40,000 a year addition to our budget, plus healthcare and travel and reimbursements. I don't know where we're getting that from. Nothing has changed about last year's fundraising process. So I know we're going to raise this $558 grand. Like, I know where that's coming from. But we're talking about adding another 40,000 plus on top of that. So now we're looking at almost 600 grand for me to guarantee that I can bring this person on. Who would you reach out to if you were me in your network? Who are the Democrats you know? Would you be willing to spend, who live in the state? Because I guarantee you they're not giving you the party right now. You are, but all these people you know aren't. If we sent someone out to sit down and meet with you with a notepad and a couple of hours of your day, would you be willing to go through your Rolodex, your contacts, and refer us to a handful of people, as many as we can come up with, that by my picking up the phone and calling them with a good phone number, and I say, Chris told me I can call you. Here is the situation. I'm the chairman of the state party. This is what I'm trying to do. It's that one level of separation away, right? And it's just that the people who love you and are supporting you anyway, I've found actually can get to really enjoy this process. Because it's probably been, in some cases, a secret frustration of theirs that they, from their social group, their peer group, are parting with money for the state party, but everyone else is getting off scot-free, right? And you're not asking them to fundraise for you, you're not asking them to host an event, you're asking for 2 hours of their day to go through A through Z and pull out the 10 or 15 or 20 people. You do this with your top donor class as a state party, you may end up with 100, 115, 120 brand new names that you're just one reference away from, right? For bigger people, like we've done this with developers and physicians and people who kind of have who are attending conferences and are kind of like insulated inside like a professional world. We've done joint call time as well, where it's like, look, you don't have to make the ask, but these are your friends. If you'd be on the phone with me when I'm kind of like talking to them about the party and letting them know what's going on, if you'd be willing to do that and kind of weigh in about the great stuff, you give them some talking points about the great stuff you're doing. Sometimes people will agree to do that as well. But it's an indispensable process because it's the only way you're really going to systematically grow, right? It's a box you can check over a donor's name. Was this donor Rolodexed? Was this donor mind for additional contacts. I'm going to kind of get to the last kind of piece to active fundraising for our presentation today, which is working hand in hand with call time. You can generate a lot of money with events. And I think the first key question is, beyond your major institutional event, which for a lot of us is a JJ dinner, but goes by other names as well. Florida just recently rocked the world with the Leadership Blue Gala as their main event. But how many fundraising events outside of that are you doing every year? My guess is it's probably just a handful. And if you aren't doing more, if you haven't kind of planted your flag in different parts of the state, or you haven't started a house party program, or you're not doing any of those things, my guess is there's a pretty good reason. It's probably a staff capacity reason, or you're for whatever it might be, maybe you're worried that that ultimately it'll be a lot of like sound and fury, but not raise a lot of money. Whatever the issue is, but I'm sure they're legitimate, but it's a very worthwhile question, because the problem with a lot of state party budgets is that they're hinged on this moment in the year